It is week 7, and I am reviewing Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express and In the Mood for Love, both Hong Kong-based movies. So the first question is, based on the information in week 7 learning modules, we should explain the Ophir Awards and how Great Britain came into control of Hong Kong. There's two other parts of this question, but I'm going to explain that first. So, China had a lot of stuff that people wanted. That's why the Silk Road existed. Like, it started in Xi'an. I've been in Xi'an. That's where I got this scarf. And it traveled all throughout Asia and landed in the Middle East, and then from there it went forward and spread through Europe. But they bought a bunch of, they made a bunch of ships, and they figured out another way to get to China without going through the road and going through the sea instead. So China had a lot of things people wanted: tea, porcelain, especially around the time of the 1800s. So the only thing that they would accept, the emperor at the time, was silver. They wanted silver. Britain had silver, and that's what they were giving for a long time. But then they depleted their silver because they wanted the goods so bad. But then they didn't want to pay for silver, or to pay with silver for those goods. So they addicted an entire country, well, a lot of a country, to, not an entire country, but a lot of them, to opium. Even though the country said no, the government said, stop doing that. We don't want that. That shouldn't be legal. There were some people that thought you should tax it like they do now, and decriminalize it, which might have done one thing. It would have acquiesced to the British, but and it was the Brits that was smuggling the opium, mostly through trading companies. So it wasn't technically the government, but it was like government subsidies, and also the government accepted money from those companies, and it was a whole thing. So then there was a crackdown, and the Chinese government in the early 1800s, or mid 1800s, I believe, said no and quarantined a bunch of smugglers of opium, and then took their supply and mixed it with lye and salt, and then threw it in the bay, kind of like the Boston Tea Party, but with opium. So then the British government said, how dare you, and allowed a trading company to pay for their war against China, and the Hong Kong Peninsula specifically, or like the peninsula that became known as Hong Kong, the island that became known as Hong Kong, that area. So then there was like this treaty called the Treaty of Nanjing, and because Britain, they won because they had more funding and they had better equipment, and they had, the British military, so seasoned at hurting people, and they decided to take a bunch of cities as treaty ports, and it was 5 of them, and then also Hong Kong, so they had about 6. And then there was a bunch of other, there was like a most favored nation policy, where if they gave extra privileges to other nations, then Britain automatically got those privileges also. And then there was a lack of implementation of the entirety of the treaty, coupled with civil war that began when one man decided that he was the descendant of Jesus, or not descendant, was the second coming of Jesus, and warred against the Chinese government. And then also there was the execution of a French military. So France and Britain teamed up together to attack Beijing in particular. They got to Beijing, and they sacked the Summer Palace and destroyed like ancient, thousands and thousands of years old history, because they wouldn't just let them have the goods that they wanted. That's what they wanted. So how did Great Britain hand control of Hong Kong back to China is the second part of the question. So the Kowloon Peninsula was given to Britain during the Treaty of Tientsin. I remember because it's actually pronounced something else, but they added sin to the end, which makes it seem like they were implying that there's sin in the nation, and like, because it's not Christian or something, is kind of like what I was thinking, is because that's not how you pronounce it in Mandarin. So the Qing dynasty lost to Japan, which allowed Britain to take up more than just that peninsula and the surrounding islands and a lot more of the land, and that became known as Hong Kong, because they were weakened and they needed reinforcements in that area. So they just were like, okay, you can have it on a 99-year lease, which some people thought would be forever, but then China was like, no, you said 99 years, and so there was 99 years, and like that's why Great Britain handed control back over, because they leased it. It wasn't a purchase. It wasn't owning it. It was a lease. So China was like, we're gonna call you on your bluff. You never follow your treaties. Your people never follow your treaties. Your descendants never follow your treaties. You don't follow your treaties in the Americas. You don't follow your treaties in Africa. You don't follow your treaties. So we're gonna make you follow our treaty that we made together. That lease is a lease. And so there was a handover period of 50 years that Margaret Thatcher negotiated for, and her team, but like she secured it. So in 2047, it'll go completely back to mainland China. So that meant that in, what was it, 1997 is when the handover happened after the lease period, and that became the one. There was one condition that Britain had, which was the one country, two systems. That's the last question, part of the question. Last to explain what is meant by the phrase one country, two systems. They said, yes, we'll hand it back over, which, yeah, or there'd be a war or something. But we will negotiate for a one country, two systems policy. So, yes, you can have it. It's one country, it's yours. However, you have to keep the system that's in place there in place. So it's a very free market compared to China's, quote, socialist one-party state, which I studied China, like it's history. Like I took a lot of classes when I was at MSU for 5 years on China, and I learned Mandarin, and I learned about Chinese history, and I learned particularly about this history. And they're a post-socialist nation, so they're not actually socialist. They don't have like an old age pension, for example. They have nothing to do. They have nothing for old people to take care of them in their old age, except like hoping that the children of the older folks will take care of them, or their community will. As like a regular kind of, that's kind of what's always happened historically kind of thing. So socialist is kind of a loose term. But yeah, Hong Kong has like they have a free media, or at least an independent media, and a really free economy. Business is booming in Hong Kong, and there are more civil rights. Like, you can be gay in Hong Kong, which you technically can't be in China, mainland China at least. And I have friends that are on both sides of the divide, and on both sides of being straight and being queer. So this whole unit was a lot of personal stuff for me. So anyways, that's that. The next part, ChungKing Express. So list the film, director, and year the film was made. It was in 1994 by Wong Kar-wai, and it's from Hong Kong. The summary of the film. So it's like two parts. The first part is they both feature a cop. In the first one, the cop is like younger man. He just broke up with his girlfriend, just like the second cop does. Rather, his girlfriend breaks up with him. But he broke up with his girlfriend because his daddy manager was like, oh, well, she looks like a Japanese actress, and like I don't know if you know about China, but there's a lot of tension between Japan and China that still exists because of Japan's whole colonizing of various parts of China over time, and brutality, and like the rape of Nanjing, for example. Kind of still has there's still a lot of bad blood between the two nations, and so he breaks up with his girlfriend because his boss says so, and then he acts like she did him wrong throughout that part of the film. He calls up a bunch of girls that he knows and tries to like get dates with them because she won't return his like love interest. He like gets these cans of pineapple that are dated for May 1st, which is his birthday, but also like her name's May. And she seems to be younger too, and like the word May is like younger sister, so like that's a little interesting. That I think the director chose that name on purpose, which is interesting. A good choice to describe what was going on, because like she lives with her parents and stuff, and like he has to climb down from her balcony. He's like 25, but she seems to be maybe younger than that. Anyways, he gets all sad boy a lot. Anyways, then he ends up hooking up with a drug dealer, because there's this whole other storyline happening at the same time as his storyline, with a drug dealer, a drug smuggler, that like organizes a whole plot to smuggle what looks to be cocaine probably. And there's a lot of other stuff that happens, but they end up not hooking up, but they cuddle briefly at a bar, and then they go back to a hotel, and she just kind of rests, and then finishes her job that she's on, and murders who might have been her ex-boyfriend, it seems. And then and it goes back to the man who then briefly passes over Faye, who's the main character of the second half. And then then the story picks up with Faye and the second cop. So the second cop is with a air attendant, flight hostess. Well, I can't remember what the name of that job is called. But anyways, flight attendant. There we go. And he and she have like this romance, but then she leaves him, and it happens over the course of several visits to the same shop that the first cop goes to a lot, like snack shop, and he ends up falling for a waitress that falls for him first, and she like visits his apartment without him knowing. So she breaks into his apartment and does a bunch of silly, weird, crazy stuff that he thinks is his ex-girlfriend, but it's not. And then he finds out it's her, and he asks her out on a date, and then there's like a whole misconnection thing, but then they end up coming together at the end, and it's like really cute and pretty, and yeah. So that's the basic plot. Who's the protagonist? What's their goal? What's in the way? Explain. I think all four characters that are main characters are protagonists in a way. So the first cop, he was trying to recover from a breakup. He does have a successful rebound, and it doesn't seem to make him happy though, so he kind of doesn't succeed in getting over the breakup. The second character, the drug smuggler, is trying to find or escape some Indian people that she got caught up with in the drug market, and I don't know, they kind of leaves it open-ended. We don't know what happens with her exactly, if she ends up being okay or not. The second cop is also getting over a breakup, and it seems like, yeah, that does work out for him because he ends up falling in love with Faye instead, and his goal of getting over the breakup works out in the end. And then Faye is just trying to kind of be herself. She also wants to go to California. She does successfully go to California, and she successfully is herself and like an independent woman, and so that works out for her too. The antagonists. I think there's not really like a main antagonist. I think you could say Faye is sometimes antagonistic with the way that she like presents in her romance to the second cop. Like she does antagonistic things to him. Like she floods his apartment at some point. But I don't think she's an antagonist because she is also a protagonist. But maybe she's both. But I think maybe she's not antagonistic. Maybe she's not an antagonist. She's just antagonistic at times. Explain how the director delineates between the two storylines of the film and shifts in both genre and style. What genre and style were used in the first half of the film compared to the second half of the film? Did you like this technique? Explain. So the first half was more like an action movie. There's a lot of like action and fight scenes, like there's like some shooting scenes. It's very fast paced. And the second one's more of like a rom-com dramedy kind of thing in genre. And did I like the technique? I did. I think it helped. The first half was more of a like childish perspective on romance. Like the first cop is very childish in his way that he deals with women and like talks to women and talks about them. And like the way he comes on to the drug dealer woman, and even she has like a pretty stunted idea of romance and love. That's like pretty toxic, and so it kind of juxtaposes that against the more slow burn romance of the second half that's like more mature. It's lighthearted, and like there's things that are immature about Faye's character obviously, and also his character, the second cop, which they don't have names, they have numbers, and I can't remember their numbers, so I'm not numbering them. But yeah, I kind of like that technique. I think it was nice, the juxtaposition. How do the two primary male characters exhibit emotional vulnerability in the film? Is this behavior typical of American leads in cinema? American cinema. Why do you think the director chose these male characters in this manner? Were the characters believable? So they're both kind of sad sacks. The first one drinks and like tries to like hook up with other women and tries to figure that out that way and get over her that way. And like hound dogs like nobody's business, like hangs his head and like is just a sad boy, which American men do all the time. The second cop kind of does the same, but he also talks to inanimate objects and like smokes out cigarettes, and he kind of, when he meets Faye, he kind of gets out of his shell a little bit for her and displays some more emotional vulnerability for her in a way. But he was kind of like a more mature man to begin with, and I think he was kind of a classic romantic drama kind of character. I don't think he was that different from American leads in that way. He has a very similar masculinity. They both have very similar masculinity to American men because men are pretty much the same across the globe. As somebody that was friends with a lot of international students from a lot of places, they're pretty much the same. Like at the end of the day. How the two primary female characters exhibit strength in the film is a behavior typical of female leads in American cinema. Why do you think the director chose such a strong female characters? Were the characters believable? I mean, the first character presents as very aggressive, and like in that way, you might say she's presenting and behaving more like a man might in a like a action film. But like I don't know how that's different than like Angelina Jolie, because I mean, what's the difference between the two really? Like she dresses up very feminine and like dress, and also she wears like a wig and stuff that's very like Farrah Fawcett, but she does things like murder people and organize crime, like organizing people to like drug smuggle and stuff, through like getting them together. Like there's a shoe cobbler and there's like a person that does like a suit. But I wouldn't say that's necessarily strength necessarily. I think it's like exhibiting masculine aggression, but I don't think that's like strength necessarily. I think she's actually a very weak character in some ways because she's very vulnerable in a lot of ways. We don't know if she even gets away from the people she's running from or running to or away from. It seems like she's running away from them. Like she says at the beginning, like if she doesn't find these people, then she'll get in like trouble somehow. And then I'd say Faye's character, even though she presents as more feminine and like, oh, she's like a manic pixie dream girl type, she exhibits a lot of strength of character and will and being who she is in her culture and in the culture of the world and like what women are expected to be, which is subservient and also like submissive and also not like out there, and you're supposed to be like demure and simple, and she's none of those things. And she's also like shows a lot of strength of will and being able to emigrate to California briefly. She does go for a year and then she becomes a flight attendant, which is a very independent job. It's very hard to be a flight attendant. I don't know if you've ever talked to anybody that's become a flight attendant, but it's like a very rigorous process to become one. So she's pretty strong in that way, I think. The countries in Hong Kong, the country that the film takes place, Hong Kong, seems to be struggling with its identity, and there are countless references to America. Based on your readings and videos from this week's learning module, explain why you believe the people living in Hong Kong at this time, 1994, were struggling with their national identity. Why do you think there are so many references to American culture? Well, as it was discussed, like there was a whole handover from Britain to America, and America exports its culture to even Britain. So it goes to Britain, and it comes to other places through Britain as well. But I would also argue that America has an export culture. Like we export our culture abroad globally, and that makes it the property of other cultures as well, like globally. I don't think that it belongs to America anymore at this point. I think its like origin point is America, but it belongs to the people of the world. For example, Coca-Cola, that was started in America. It's a company that was based in America. It started in America. It's very American, but like Mexico drinks more Coca-Cola per capita than America does. So does it belong more to Mexico than it does to the United States? And you could say like also it's manufactured there, but it started in America. So isn't it an American export, and isn't it American culture that's being exported? But like at the same time, where's it being produced? Who's consuming it mostly? Globally, American culture is consumed by people of the globe more than it is even people in America. So I don't think it's really like. Another example is like KFC. You could be like, oh, KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's literally got Kentucky in the name. Like it's American, but there's more Kentucky Fried Chickens in China than there are in the United States. It's more popular than McDonald's there, and they make it their own too. Like there's like kanji on the menu and stuff like that. So it's like a whole. There's like I read a book on it called Paradise Redefined that talks about global consumer culture and American export culture and like that kind of thing. It's by Vanessa Fong. It's really interesting. Why do you think the director filmed everything in tight and cramped spaces? How do you think the tight and cramped nature made you feel? Did it make you feel? Why do you think the first half of the movie was blurry and frenetic action? How does blurry and frenetic action make you feel? I think the second half, it was like fast paced. It's supposed to be action, but also she was smoking cocaine, so it's fast paced and it's also referencing the cocaine. I think. Oh no. I had to plug my computer in. And the tight and cramped spaces, I've lived in tight and cramped spaces, both abroad and here, and it felt familiar. It didn't feel uncomfortable to me. It felt like they do a lot with small spaces. They use ingenuity and intelligence to make it bigger for themselves. And yeah. Also, it helped you. The fast frenetic nature of the first half helped you appreciate the slow nature of the romance of the second half, I think. I appreciated the second half storyline a lot more for the reasons that I've outlined. I like romance too, so it was good and it was more mature and I liked it more. And in my opinion, with the overall message of the film, I think in some ways it's like slow love is worth the wait. Like fast love, fast paced, fast love is like fun and it's like great at first, especially at first in life. Like at the first half of the movie, it's like interesting and fun. It gets you into the movie, but it doesn't sustain the way that slow romantic love does. And I think that's kind of maybe one of the points of the film. I'd give it a 4.75 out of 5. I give it a 4.5 letterbox. The second half of the semester, or not semester, sorry, the unit was on In the Mood for Love, which is it's In the Mood for Love. It was released in 2000, also by Wong Kar-wai, also based in Hong Kong, but also there's a few scenes near the end that are in other countries. Provide the viewer with a brief summary of the film, the main actors, and principal storyline. So the main actors are Mr. Chow and Mrs. Chan, and they're both with other people. Their spouses are cheating on them with each other. They live in like a tenement housing unit right next to each other. They both rent rooms, and there's like a shared kitchen, and there's like other older couples that live in the building too that are renting to them, like Mrs. Soon and her husband, and there's Mrs. Koo and her husband as well. They find out that their spouses are cheating on each other through hanging out together one night, because slowly they figure it out on their own, and then they find out together that they both know, and then they end up developing a romance that happens over the course of him writing a book, and she helps him write the book, and then he ends up leaving for work, and there's like misconnections where they almost find each other, and they might have found each other, and we don't know for sure what happened, because they don't show everything, and then the story comes to a close in a way that will be described later, because I'm running out of time. So in my opinion, who or what was the protagonist? Make sure you address the goal of the protagonist and explain why or what stood in the way. What was the protagonist? Was the protagonist successful in achieving the goal? Explain. So, the two characters, Mr. Chow and Mrs. Chan, their goal is to understand what is happening with their spouse, and in a way, also to find love again, either with their spouse or just to find love in their life, because they don't have a lot of people in their lives. And one of Mr. Chow's goals is to write a book. So in that way, he is maybe successful, but it's implied that maybe he lost his manuscript when he's in another country working in the second year of the film. He can't find something in his room, and it's like probably the manuscript. But anyways, they both fall in love, which wasn't their express goal, but since they were both kind of trying to find love again in their life after learning of the infidelity, in a way they both succeed in finding love. They just find it in each other instead of in their spouses. In my opinion, who or what was the antagonist? There are like characters that like are very busybodies, like Mrs. Koo and Mrs. Soon. Also, they lecture her about her being out late, and like at one point she has to play mahjong and like interact with the other women and like try to cover up the fact that she's been out late with another man. But I think the antagonist is a culture that force feeds monogamy down people's throats, and like in a lot of ways that hurts people, because a lot of times when women are murdered, it's because of infidelity, and because of not infidelity but the egregious and disgusting and horrifying response to infidelity that men have often. And like Mr. Chow is like pretty reasonable about his wife's infidelity, and that he doesn't want to hurt her, but like who knows if Mr. Chan would be that way about it. So it's kind of like a murder is the response to infidelity often when women commit it, but when men are cheated on, it's usually just wounded pride that they experience, not murder. So that's kind of what I think the antagonist is. The use of the compositional framing in the film, explain how it was used to communicate isolation, confinement, temporary living conditions, voyeurism, etc. Have you seen a film shot like this before? Did the director use double framing throughout the film? I haven't seen one shot like this before. It was one of the most beautiful films I've ever watched, visually. The double framing was used to like, there's a frame, and then inside of it there would be like a doorway or a window, or you'd be looking from like another angle, which is supposed to make you feel like you're watching them, but like it starts to diminish as the film goes on, so you feel like more closer to them and you're more in their intimate space. And I think also it was used to communicate, because it's all shot from similar angles and like all these different scenes happen in the camera's at the same place. it kind of, instead of people moving through space to indicate time, the time becomes a feature instead, and the space stays static, and the blocking is not about like using the space as much as like time is indicated just by time itself. Time gets to stand out as like a featured asset of the film rather than like space being like the main thing. How did I interpret the ending of the film with regards to Mr. Chow? How did I interpret the ending of the film with regards to Mrs. Chan and that of her child? And who do you think the father of the child was? I'm going to address this together. So archival footage of a royal Cambodian couple meeting some white people is shown, setting the space in Cambodia at the end. And Mr. Chow is shown in an ancient temple. And he mentions earlier when he's in, starts, starts with an S. Not, it's Singapore. He's in Singapore, and he's with with Ping, his friend Ping, who he moved to work with in Singapore, and leaves his he leaves her Mrs. Chan behind to work, and she has this whole like wishing that he hadn't left thing that happens, and like maybe things could have unfolded differently, and maybe they could have. There's an implication that either she imagined that like there was a different way that things could have unfolded, or they actually did go back to their shared room that they rented separately to work and write in. So, anyways, he says that he wishes that he could speak into a hole and like just seal off with mud his secrets, and Ping is like, forget about it. But then they show him at an ancient temple in Cambodia whispering and kissing a stone at a temple, and then later it's covered over with grass and mud. And I think in a way Mrs. Chan wasn't just some secret to him. She was like so perfect and holy in a way to him that he didn't want to ruin her by making it clear to the world that there had been infidelity on her part, because then, I mean, there's no guarantee that her husband would have left her. There's no guarantee that a divorce could have happened. There's no guarantee that they could have even been together after that. So she could have had the same outcome except worse, because then the world would know of the infidelity, and she would be stuck with the same man anyways. So he treated her like a temple to be honored and left alone, but then at the same time left her abandoned like the temple itself is abandoned in the film. And I thought a lot about this one because it was a really beautiful movie. And there's even like a child monk that's in there's not many people at the almost abandoned temple. There's like a child monk in one of the scenes, and that's kind of echoed by the child at the end of the movie, who I believe is his child, but like in treating her like a temple to be honored, he leaves her abandoned like the temple that he goes and visits is almost abandoned with the child also. I think that's an implication that it was his child. I didn't read that somewhere. I came up with that in my own brain because I'm smart. And what was my favorite aspect? I loved of the film. Was it acting, costume design, cinematography? It was the costume design. The fabrics that were used for her chupaos and the way the chupaos were used to indicate the passage of time as well was like one of my favorite things that happened. I think the overall message of the film is that cultural expectations of monogamy worldwide, and in this context in particular, are porous enough that like the villains are supposed to be the non-monogamous people, and the protagonists being the non-monogamous people. It's not ethical non-monogamy, but it's non-monogamy. And what's ethical about either characters, I think, is a question. And I think that a lot of times monogamy makes people kind of broken and lonely inside, and they stay in stuck relationships that they don't want to be in because they have to be, even if it like sometimes leads to the sanctity of marriage ends up becoming more important than the sanctity of life, which is why like murders happen. Like people care more about this vow than they care about human life sometimes. And in his case, he kind of cared more about his vows than he cared about the life that she gave birth to. That was his child also. So I don't know. I think that could be one of the points and overall messages. A 5 out of 5 rating. Throwaway culture, society. Citizens depend on mass production, mass produced food, furniture, etc. There's an expiration date on the freedoms and way of life. So, in the video Understanding ChungKing Express, what is the term meant by I'm running out of time, but I'm going to try really quick to finish up. In the video Understanding ChungKing Express, what is meant by the term throwaway society? How does that play into the overall theme of the film? So, in the video it talks about how throwaway culture exists, and that like objects are thrown away, like things are made to be thrown away, like mass-produced furniture, fast food, all that. And I think personally that it plays into the existence of Hong Kong itself because of that 99-year lease and then the 50-year expiration date on like the way of life of Hong Kong. In 2047, things are going to change. So in a way, like they've created a society that's supposed to be this way for a certain amount of time, and then it has an expiration date on it. And in the movie Chungking Express, the expiration date is on the cans of pineapple, so it's used as a plot point even, like, and the story of him, like the cop in May. And there's a potential expiration date on the second half's romance because of the boarding pass that she gives him that has a 1 year, like it's from 1 year from now you can visit me or whatever. And I'm over on time, but I think the other, like, addressing the questions is probably more important than being better on time, unfortunately. But they don't actually throw away their romance in the second half of the movie, so it's not throwaway culture for that second half. They find each other again, and he doesn't even throw away the napkin that she writes the boarding pass on. So that's kind of nice. In the video, How Wong Kar-wai visualizes time, what's meant by the term step printing, and how is it used to help tell the story. So frames are shot 24 frames per second usually, and played back 24 frames per second usually. If you shoot 48 frames per second and play it back 24 frames per second, that makes the time slower by twice. You can also put the frames. You can also shoot in 24 frames per second and then duplicate each of the frames, each of the 24 frames, and make it like frame 1, frame 1, frame 2, frame 2, frame 3, frame 3, and then it like extends. Like they would do that with physical like printing of film, and still can if you print on film, and that creates a slower motion picture. But then because it's physically reproduced, it sometimes has little like little slight differences in the reproduction, and you can kind of do it on like footage, like digital editing software now, but it's not exactly the same because they're not reproducing that physical material. So there's not the little imperfections that make it a particular style in a way. Oh, and the way that it's used in the film. So it helps with the story at the beginning because it's like jerky, fast motion action movie, but also like she's cocaine smuggling, and like he's also like fast and like trying to get over this breakup by dating a bunch of people or trying to date people. Nobody really bites, but he tries. And in the second half, it's used to do slow motion because you can make it slow motion too, and it's not as, it's like also because of the shutter, when you leave the aperture open for longer, it like takes in more light and it makes things like a little more blurry. So that's also used to like slow down things and make things a little more dreamy in the second half in certain parts of it, which also helps with the slow romance thing. In the video Genius of Wong Kar-wai, what's meant by the term pathetic fallacy, and how is the literary device used in both films, Chungking Express and The Mood for Love. I had to Google what pathetic fallacy means because the video doesn't actually explain the term, it just kind of explains how it's used. But it means like when you give personification to animals or inanimate objects. And an example in Chungking Express is like the second half, the cop talks to the inanimate objects. There's like a rag that he talks to that's like sad and like used up, and it kind of like is like, oh, sad poor rag, sad rag, and it like is a sad, it's sad one. And then in the movie In the Mood for Love, the video talks about one use of the lamp as like hope, but there's also a use about 15 or 20 minutes in when Mrs. Wong finds out that Mrs. Chan finds out that her husband might be cheating on her, and so the lamp kind of like, there's this lamp that kind of like moves back and forth, and it's the only one that's moving back and forth like that, and it's kind of like her going back and forth in her mind about whether this is happening or not to her. So it's like an uncertain lamp, and like the lamp presents uncertainty, but it's also like an uncertain lamp within itself. Like, why is it moving back and forth? Which film did I enjoy more this week? I think In the Mood for Love. I didn't get to talk about it as much, but I liked it a lot more. It's a period piece. I love period dramas. It's a romance. It was more mature. It was more developed, and it came later in his career. And there's a reason it won a bunch of awards. And then both films of this week are considered art house, which is a type of film that strays from the mainstream commercial path to create a new artistic expression. These films are typically characterized by more serious, more experimental nature, prioritize director creativity and artistic vision over mass-produced market appeal. Question: did you enjoy the unique style and substance of these films? Explain. I think in a way it's like art house is like the new French new wave in a way. I think not new, but it's like French new wave, but like make it modern, or like more contemporary. I did like them. I thought they were a lot more visually appealing than the other films. They're a lot more just beautiful to look at. the second one, especially In the Mood for Love, was gorgeous. It was so pretty. And I thought the characters were more developed and likable, and you had to be with them for longer. At least in the Mood for Love, especially, you had to be with them for longer, and they became more like substantial than characters in some of the other films, where they're more used for the plot structure than like the character development, and like the psychology of them was explored a lot. And all this, there was a lot of psychological stuff going on in both of the films, between like what was going on with the characters in their minds was apparent through their actions too, rather than just their words, which a lot of people talk a lot and like say a lot of words, but like what do they do? So yeah, there was more than meets the eye, and that's why they both ended up higher up. They both are in the top 5 this week because I liked them a lot. Um, and as a cinephile and a speaker of Mandarin, and also somebody that's visited Hong Kong, I found it like kind of also very nostalgic. So it was nice that the movies were really good too this week. I really liked In the Mood for Love. It's definitely in the top 5. I think it's in my top 3 right now. So yeah, that's that on that. Thank you. Sorry that I went over on time, but I thought I should address the questions more than just the time.